You know, if it's not about sports, I find it very hard to concentrate.
Hey, what's up guys? Braden here, and today I'm going to tell you about the time the Packers drafted a serial killer. The Green Bay Packers, the third oldest franchise in the NFL, founded in 1919 as the Indian Packers. They've won 11 NFL championships and 4 Super Bowls. They boast 28 Hall of Fame players. Serial killers, people who commit 3 or more murders with a cooling off period between each murder. Examples of some of the more infamous ones include Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, Richard Ramirez, and Dennis Rader. They typically lack empathy for their victims or guilt for their crimes, and usually put on a mask of being a normal member of society until they are caught. So what do these two topics have in common? Emotionally stunted women love them both. And also a man named Randall Woodfield, also known as the I-5 Killer, who was drafted by the Packers in the 1974 NFL Draft. Randall Woodfield was born on December 26, 1950 in Salem, Oregon. He grew up middle class but never quite fit in. He had 2 sisters and felt outnumbered and excluded. By the time he was in junior high, he had begun a gross, disgusting habit of exposing his genitals to strangers in public, and eventually was arrested for it later in high school. But he was a hometown hero star athlete, and so his high school football coaches helped keep the arrest quiet to avoid expulsion from his high school. He played wide receiver for Newport High School in Newport, Oregon, and his athletic ability carried him into college, where he earned a spot on the Portland State Vikings football team in 1970 after spending 2 years at a community college. His coach at PSU, Gary Hamblett, said, quote, "When he was with me, he was the nicest, most gentlemanly kid I ever knew. He was quiet and polite, hardworking, and real coachable," unquote. Other teammates and classmates at Portland State recalled him as being quiet and introverted, but a talented football player nonetheless. More legal trouble was to follow for Woodfield in his college years, being arrested for vandalizing the apartment of an ex-girlfriend in 1970 and public indecency in 1972. Yet another public indecency arrest would occur the following year in 1973. Up to 10 total public indecency incidents involving him were said to occur, some resulting in an arrest and some not. Former Portland State quarterback Anthony Stoudemire, who just so happens to be the uncle of former NBA player Damon Stoudemire, recalled that Randall Woodfield had trouble fitting in and didn't have much interest in getting to know his teammates or classmates. Stoudemire's brother Charles recalled that Woodfield was lazy and socially awkward. Charles also said that Woodfield was scared to get hit, and if you're a receiver, obviously that's a fear you have to get over. Woodfield had a decent college career but chose to drop out of college before he graduated and entered the 1974 NFL Draft. Despite not being a very sought-after prospect, he was drafted by the Green Bay Packers in the 17th round, 428th overall. Former Portland State linebacker Bill Hansen remembers being surprised to learn that Woodfield was drafted into the NFL. Hansen said, quote, "He was an athletic kid, but his football skills weren't the best. That's why everybody was so shocked when the Packers took him," unquote. Woodfield tried to cozy up to Packers head coach and general manager Dan Devine, trying to establish a connection with his coach to avoid being cut, but it didn't work because Devine cut Woodfield partway through the summer of '74. A lot of this had to do with the fact that Devine's offense was heavily centered around the run, and he simply didn't have room on the roster for a lot of receivers. But some people suggest other factors may have been at play, notably the fact that he had been arrested multiple times for public indecency and for exposing himself in public, which no doubt raised character concerns. And oh boy, were those concerns ever justified. It turned out that the Packers hadn't bothered to research this guy too much. For you see, there was a monster inside of Woodfield, and soon it was about to come out. He soon assaulted several women at knife point and was later arrested for it in 1975. He pled guilty to it later that year and was sentenced to 10 years behind bars. But unfortunately for the entire Pacific Northwest, and particularly the women of the Pacific Northwest, he was released just 4 years later in 1979. Pretty much as soon as he was released from prison in July of 1979, he began robbing stores and assaulting women. Throughout the fall and winter of 1980, he robbed and killed several people and assaulted assaulted dozens of women. His first known murder was actually a couple, Darcy Fix and Douglas Altig, whom he killed on Thanksgiving Day of 1980. He continued going on an absolute tear of destruction, sexual assault, and murder, and his crimes spanned from Northern California all the way to the state of Washington. In one case, he even went as far as to sexually assault two sisters, aged 10 and 8 years old, and then subsequently killed them both. Seriously, fuck this guy. I hope he rots in hell. His routine often included wearing a fake beard and forcing women at gunpoint to do certain things to him, if you get my drift. Several times he was questioned by police, but let go and cleared each time. In one case, he was cleared because his blood type did not match the semen found inside the victim, but today we know blood tests are not very reliable, and in fact, that's one of the reasons DNA testing was developed. He was soon referred to as the I-5 Bandit and I-5 Killer by law enforcement and media, named for his tendency to commit his crimes along US Interstate 5. He had several incidents where he robbed and then raped women working alone at night. In one case, he even broke into a home and assaulted a 14-year-old girl and then shot her and her mother in the head several times. What a disgusting piece of filth this guy was. He was known for wearing a fake beard in some but not all of his robberies, and several times forced women to perform certain acts on him while at gunpoint or knife point, and oftentimes he'd kill them afterwards. For several of these crimes, he managed to be cleared as a suspect by police, but the near arrest only made him that much bolder. In February of 1981, just a mere 18 months after his release from prison, he threw a Valentine's Day party and invited some people he knew from college. No one showed up, likely because they all thought he was a creepy weirdo and wanted nothing to do with him. And so he ended up driving to Beaverton, Oregon, specifically to the home of an 18-year-old woman named Julie Reitz, whom he had known from his time as working at a bouncer at a bar. She let him in and they shared a bottle of wine together. She likely thought it was just a visit from an old friend, and sadly, she had no idea how much danger she was really in. The night soon turned violent as Woodfield proceeded to rape Julie and then violently shot her in the head, killing her. By the end of February of 1981, police had their sights set squarely on Randall Woodfield. Woodfield had committed 3 more robberies and 1 sexual assault by the end of February, after the murder of Julie Reitz occurred. Detectives put together call logs showing that Woodfield had placed calls using payphones that were near the murder sites, and around the same time they were committed as well. Randall Woodfield ended up being brought into the Salem, Oregon Police Department on March 5th, 1981 for questioning. Woodfield likely thought he'd be able to talk his way out of it, just as he had done before, but police had a warrant to search his apartment and they found a spent .32 shell casing, which matched the weapon used in the murders. Police also found a roll of tape matching the tape found on one of the victims. Woodfield was officially arrested on March 7th, and on March 16th, a whole laundry list of charges including murder, rape, sodomy, attempted kidnapping, armed robbery, and illegal possession of firearms by a felon were all levied against him in several different jurisdictions in Washington and Oregon. Now, weirdly enough, the prosecutor for Woodfield's case was the son of actor Dick Van Dyke, named Chris Van Dyke. Van Dyke said, quote, "He's the coldest, most detached defendant I've ever seen," unquote. On June 26, 1981, Woodfield was convicted on one of the murders and sentenced to life in prison plus 90 years. Although he was only charged with one murder, he is believed to have been responsible for 44 fucking murders, making him one of the most prolific serial killers of all time, in terms of body count at least. In October of 1981, a second trial was held where Woodfield faced charges of sodomy and illegal possession of a firearm. He was ultimately convicted and had 35 years tacked onto his sentence. Prosecutors chose not to pursue charges for the other murders, sexual assaults, and robberies because he was already serving life plus 90 years plus another 35. So essentially, they didn't want to waste money because he'd die in prison either way. Author Anne Rule put together a more comprehensive accounting of his crimes, but I must warn you, a lot of it is pretty horrifying and disturbing. Woodfield, like the spineless coward he is, actually sued Rule in April of 1987 for libel, seeking $12 million, but the case was thrown out of court pretty quickly. During his time in prison, Woodfield has married 3 times and divorced twice, because of course he has. Why do women love killers and monsters, man? I have made some pretty horrible choices on my dating record, but come on ladies, quit being retarded. Find a nice sweet guy to bring home to mom and dad. If the man you're interested in has murdered and raped dozens of women, he's probably not the guy for you. That's my Dr. Phil advice. I don't get women, bro. Woodfield is still alive and rotting in prison like he deserves. He's currently 73 years old, and I hope every day in prison is pure hell for him. He deserves zero happiness and nothing but misery for the rest of his rotten days. Fuck this guy. Anyway, if you liked this video, leave a like. If you hated it, leave a dislike. But either way, comment and subscribe. Peace out.
Can never ever find the right words, and there's no way this is real life. There's no telling you're the right girl, so I can only say that it feels right. It feels right, it feels right. Yeah, I can only say that it feels right. It feels right, it feels right. Yeah, I can only say that it feels right.